An empty treasury, broken tracks, and the first test of freedom. The first budget of independent India and the real story of struggle. Imagine this, the country has become independent, the tricolor is flying, but the moment the government takes charge, a document is placed in front of it that could make anyone's hands tremble. The treasury is almost empty, millions of people are on the streets, cities have been burnt, and the railway, called the lifeline of the nation, is itself fighting a battle between life and death. The fear is that the dream of freedom might turn into economic chaos. The curiosity is how, in such conditions, India presented its first budget. And the question is, was it even possible to hold together such a shattered country? The 15th of August, 1947. India became free, but what came with freedom was not just celebration. It came with the pain of partition, the ashes of violence, endless lines of refugees, and an administration that had to be built overnight. The British had left, but they left behind a system that was now divided between India and Pakistan. Government offices, files, employees, railways, the army, the treasury. Everything had to be divided. In such a situation, independent India's first budget was not an ordinary budget. It was not even for a full year. It was only for 7.5 months, from the 15th of August 1947 to the 31st of March 1948. But the burden was as if the problems of several years had come together at once. This budget was not just an account of money. It was the story of a struggle in which a new nation was trying to stand on its own feet. Let's first talk about the railways. Today we complain about ticket booking, delays, or fares. But in 1947, the railways were not just a means of travel. They were the heartbeat of the country. Food grains, coal, the army, refugees, everything depended on the railways. And partition had almost broken this lifeline. The partition of 1947 was nothing short of an earthquake for the railways. Many crucial rail routes suddenly went across the border. Trains that used to run to Lahore or Karachi now abruptly stopped at an international boundary. The signaling system broke down. Schedules collapsed. Goods trains got stuck. And the biggest problem, migration of staff. Railway budget documents show that around 1,26300 railway employees chose to move from Pakistan to India. Of these, about 1,08400 employees had already reached India or had informed about their arrival. Think about it. This is not just a number. These are 1,08400 families who had to be resettled, given new postings, and put back to work. And what is astonishing is that around 1,04000 of them had already been given new postings. That too at a time when offices, housing, and resources were themselves in crisis. On the other hand, around 83,000 employees chose to move from India to Pakistan. In other words, the entire human resource structure of the railways had been turned upside down. People who had worked on the same routes for years were suddenly being sent to unfamiliar places. For the administration, this was nothing less than a nightmare. But along with people, the biggest problem for the railways was coal. Even during 1946, there had already been a sharp decline in coal transportation. After partition, the situation became even worse. Without coal, trains cannot run, factories cannot operate, power generation can come to a halt. The railways themselves were struggling to get coal just to run their engines. Another technical but extremely important issue was the turnaround time of wagons. A freight wagon that earlier completed its cycle in 9 to 10 days was now taking 14 to 15 days. This meant that without adding a single new wagon, the railway's effective capacity had fallen by 40 to 50%. The system was the same, but the output was cut almost in half. Meanwhile, the railways were burdened with another responsibility. Refugees. Millions of people were coming from Pakistan to India. Bundles on their heads, children's fingers in their hands, and fear in their eyes. Trains had become instruments of relief and rescue. Regular passenger services had to be reduced because human lives were the priority. The railways were running at a loss, but they had to keep moving. Because if the train stopped, the country would stop. Now let's come to the financial dispute that made independent India's first budget even more complex. Partition was not just about land. Railway assets, wagons, engines, workshops, and the debt associated with them all had to be divided. The question was, on what basis? India's position was that the division should be based on book value minus depreciation. That is, the value on paper after accounting for wear and tear. Pakistan's argument was different. They said the division should be based on the earning capacity of the railways, meaning which part could generate how much revenue. The difference was not just technical. It was a difference of hundreds of crores of rupees. If India's view was accepted, India would have a capital liability of around 660 crore and Pakistan around 150 crore. But if Pakistan's formula was applied, India's burden could rise to about 757 crore. At that time, this amount was like a mountain. The issue became so complicated that it had to be taken to an arbitral tribunal. Now try to understand the condition of the treasury at that time. The British did not leave behind a full treasury when they left India. On top of that, India had to give Pakistan its agreed share. Huge amounts were being spent on refugee rehabilitation. Cities destroyed by riots had to be rebuilt. A new government, new ministries, new systems. Everything needed money. But income was limited. In such circumstances, independent India's first budget was presented. It was not for a full year, but only for 7.5 months. Yet the uncertainty was so high that many expenses could not even be estimated. The government knew spending would increase, but how much? No one knew. The railways themselves were running at a loss. So there was no expectation that they could provide major support to the general budget. In fact, expenditure on the railways was rising. New service conditions for employees, wage-related issues, rising prices of coal and food grains. All of this had broken the railways back. The government had very limited options. Either allow the deficit to increase or place the burden on the common people. Eventually, a difficult decision was taken. Railway fares and freight charges were increased. Especially for coal, iron and steel, and essential goods, higher freight was planned to generate more revenue. This decision was not popular, but circumstances left no choice. This was the phase when the country was learning that freedom does not mean only rights but also responsibility. The government knew that every decision would hurt someone. But if the railways were not saved, the economy could not return to track. Looking back today, the first budget of 1947 to 48 gives us not just numbers but a mindset. A mindset where the government and the system accepted that conditions were bad, but giving up was not an option. Resources were scarce, but determination was strong. Efforts to rebuild the railways had already begun. Employees were adjusted. Supply chains were slowly brought back on track. Attempts continued to resolve financial disputes with Pakistan. And most importantly, the country chose not to stop. There were no big dreams in this first budget. No populist announcements. This was not a budget of ambition, but a budget of survival. It reflected a time when the government's biggest objective was to prevent the country from falling apart. Today, when we look at budgets through the lens of tax slabs, exemptions and schemes, the 1947 to 48 budget reminds us that once, the meaning of a budget was very simple: to keep the country alive. Amid the burden of partition, the railway crisis, and a liability of 660 crore, India faced its first economic test. And perhaps this is where India's economic journey truly began. A journey that started with an empty treasury and today is counted among the world's major economies. That is why independent India's first budget is not just history. It is the story of a resolve that said, no matter how bad the circumstances are, the country must move forward.
If our video has taught you something new, do not forget to like and share this video so that this information can reach others as well. Your likes and shares are a source of inspiration for us. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let us know in the comments. It will be our honor to answer your questions and listen to suggestions. And yes, if you like our content, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you stay connected with every new story. Thank you. GRT Business YouTube channel sources, news from various news agencies, opinion polls and other public sources. We try to ensure that every report and summary is accurate and verified, but we are not responsible for any dispute or error. Our aim is only to provide you with accurate information.